Right, Pennington, introduction. I did have something that I was going to share. I should have started sharing that before I did this, but oh well. Um, his dad was alderman of London, England, and was mayor for 2 years, two terms, I think it is. I don't know why the terms are only 1 year apart. So he comes from gentry, I would say, I would call it myself. Comes from the bigwigs in the big city of London. And so here's a section from I'm taking this and one part where we're going to do some reading from a book that's on archive.org called Brief Extracts from Pennington's Works. So there's the year. He's born in 1617. Very highly educated man, very intelligent man. Um, he actually was very concerned about Christian ideas and so forth, and started his own church, his own independent church, before he became a Quaker. But he was very limited, he would say, to his intellect, his intellectual appreciation of the scriptures, um, doctrine. In fact, he quite looked down on Quakers because he thought that their doctrines were insufficient and just not up to snuff. And that ego, it was something that had to overcome, and it took a while. He had to be brought, as many of us, myself included, we had to be brought to our knees before we'd submit. But he thought, he quite thought he was having the right way, but he could never get that sense of God and perfection in him that he quite wanted. It was always flagging and not very permanent. He did have experiences with God, so he knew there was something real there, but he couldn't maintain it. And just his background of his theology, which I'll give you a little bit of background beforehand so that you might understand the readings when we do read them, is that he really believed and experienced that God could produce his perfection within us. And because he was a man of great intellect and doctrine and willpower, I guess, in some ways, he found that got in the way of God producing his perfection. If he thought he could produce it himself, then he wouldn't be relying on God. He wouldn't depend on God to produce it within him. So about 2/3 of the way down this page, where it says, now from this part in man arises all the uncertainty and doubts and dissatisfactions about religion. And hence arise the opinions and judgments and reasonings in the minds of men. Yeah, indeed, the best of men's religion here is but an opinion or judgment, which the breath of God's Spirit will shake and dissolve everywhere, sooner or later. All flesh is grass, and all the beauty of men's knowledge, religion, and worship here will wither as grass. All the buildings and churches that were raised here, however beautiful, are but Babylon, built by man's understanding, by man's knowledge, by man's comprehension, by man's wisdom, by man's skill, and indeed by man's will and time, and their understanding, beauty, strength, and glory, and is just but from man, and in man's day, and will fade like a flower. The true certainty is in the day of God, from the light of his Spirit shining into man's spirit, from God's inward reaching to the heart by his power, and testifying his truth there. And this, or manifesting his truth there, would be a good translation of that. And this, all the powers of darkness cannot prevail against, cannot extinguish in itself. No, nor against that man that is kept to it, kept to that power, that light within him. For it is the rock, the only rock upon which the whole church is built, and which cannot fail to preserve every member of the church which is built upon it. Ye then that would come to certainty in religion, observe the way in which made manifest from God in this our day. Blessed be his name, which is this: mind the witness of God in thy heart, and come to and build upon the light thereof. Dwell not in reasonings. Take not up thy religion in reasonings of the mind, but pass through them, pass beyond them, into a light of a higher nature, Christ. Wait to know the birth which is from God, and the light which he gives to that birth. What is the birth? Is it not the birth of and from the second Adam, Christ? And what is the heavenly birth's light? Is it not the light of the second Adam's? Christ. Is it not the nature and kind above the light of the first Adam? Is it in nature and kind above the first light of the first Adam? Adam, the natural man. Where is the seat of reasonings? Is it not the earthly mind, the following mind? Here lies man's strength and man's wisdom and man's life. It is so indeed, but the wisdom of Christ, the light of Christ, the life of Christ, the power of Christ is across to this. Finds it in the enmity against God, finds it in enmity to God, crucifies it, slays it, brings it to nothing. And he that will become wise as to God must become a fool unto all this, a child, a babe, entering the kingdom without this, all this intellectual, egotistical head knowledge, and must there remain naked as to this, and never put it on no more. Now observe ye that you have an understanding in the true sense, the difference between the religion which God has taught us and led us unto, and the religions of all men upon the earth besides this, outside of this. Our religion stands wholly out of that which all their religion stands in, outside of that. Whenever you see out, it usually means outside. Their religion stands in the comprehension, in a belief of a literal relation or description. Our religion stands in the principle, which is God, which changes the mind, transforms it, where the spirit of life appears to and witnesses in the conscious and the consciousness to and concerning the things of the kingdom, where we hear the voice and we see the express image of the invisible one, and know things not from an outward relation, not from the intellect, not from somebody telling us, but from their inward nature, virtue, and power, being made manifest by God. Yeah, here we must profess, so we know things that are fully satisfied about them. And we enjoy them inwardly. This is our whole religion. This is what it consists of, to wit, the silence and the death of the flesh and the fleshly mind, and the quickening and flowing of the life of the Spirit instead. For he is of the new birth, of the new creation, of the second Adam, Christ, the Lord from heaven, is as really alive to God and as really lives in him in his spirit, as ever he was dead in trespasses and sins in the time of his alienation and estrangement from God. So here we have a very severe kind of thing, because he had so much intelligence, because he had so much doctrine, and because that kept him actually away from God and kept him out of the perfection that God produced within him. It's very strong in him that he has to reject all that and replace that with what God provides. What's livingly coming from God each moment, the revelation that comes from heaven, that's what Jesus builds his church on, and nothing else. It's not partially this and partially that. It's not mixture. So here we get into some of his testimony about how he became a believer, how he came to this position. And his heart came into unity with God. That's what he was looking for. He was looking for this God-sustained, God-produced unity of heart with God. And he couldn't do that with all his own intellect and his theories and his doctrines and so forth. He couldn't do it with his own willpower. So the question comes up, well then, how did this come about? Some will ask. Why thus? The Lord opened my spirit. The Lord gave me a certain and sensible feeling of the pure seed, which had been with me from the beginning. The Lord caused his holy power to fall upon me and gave me such an inward demonstration and feeling of the seed of life that I cried out in my spirit, this is he, there is no other. There never was another. He was always near me, though I knew him not sensibly, not directly. And now he was revealed in me and to me by the Father. Oh, that I might now be joined to him and he alone might live in me. Echoing Paul's statement that Christ is the one who lives in him. He no longer lives in him for himself. And so in the willingness which God had wrought in me, in the day of his power to my soul, I gave up to be instructed, exercised, and led by him in waiting for and feeling of his holy seed, that all might be wrought out of me which could not live in the seed, or with the seed, but would be hindering and dwelling and reigning in the seed, would be opposing. I must have missed the line here. It would be hindering that dwelling and reigning of the seed in me, while it remained and had power. And so I have gone through a sore travail and fight of afflictions and temptations of many kinds, where the Lord has been merciful to me and helping me and preserving the spark of life within me. In the midst of many things which he had befallen me, whose nature tended to quench and extinguish that spark of God, that life of God, that seed of God, and its reign within me. Now the Lord knows these things I do not utter in a boastful way. I would rather speak about my nothingness, my emptiness, my weakness, my manifold infirmities, which I feel more than ever. The Lord has broken the man part in me, broken down. And I am a worm and no man before him. I have no strength to do any good or service for him in my own strength. Nay, I can't even watch over and preserve myself. I feel daily that I keep not alive my own soul, but am weaker before men, yea, weaker in my spirit as in myself than I have ever been. But I cannot utter to the praise of my God and feel his arm stretched out for me. And my weakness, which I feel in myself, is not my loss, but my advantage in him. And these things I write, having no end at all therein in my own, no base purposes, no motive in me to do so. But I do so, it's because it's required of me. And in submission to God, I give it up for him to do, leaving the success and service of it with him. So it's really stressing that if you notice all these verbs, he's receiving it. It's something that God's causing within him. He's not producing it himself, and nor could he. But in his weaknesses, God's strength has been shown forth, and it's been, even the weaknesses of God are stronger than man's strengths, so-called, that we might think, that ego might think. Now, having thus met the true way and walked with the Lord therein, wherein daily certainty, the full assurance of faith and of understanding is at length obtained, I cannot be silent. True love and pure life stirring in me and moving me, but am necessitated to testify it to others. So there's a certainty that comes from the ego, from being programmed, from outward knowledge. That's not what's being produced here. That's evil and produces bad fruit. but the certainty that comes from God that he is sustaining moment by moment produces only infinite good fruit. And it's the very thing that the church is supposed to be built upon, the ecclesia. So this is it. To retire inwardly and wait to feel somewhat of the Lord, somewhat of his Holy Spirit and power, discovering and drawing away from that which is contrary to him and towards his holy nature and heavenly image. And then, as the mind is joined to this, somewhat is received, some true life, some true light, some true discerning, which a creature not exceeding, not going beyond, not getting ahead of our guide, but abiding in the measure of, is safe. We're safe when we abide in what he gives us and not going beyond it. But it's an easy to err from this and hard to abide in it and not going before getting ahead of its leading our guide. But he that feels the life and begins in the life, does he not begin safely? And he that waits and fears and go on to no further than his captain goes before him, does he not proceed safely? The safety is sticking with our guide, not going ahead in our own intellect and our own willpower. Yea, very safely, even till he cometh to be so settled and established in the virtue, demonstration, and power of truth, as nothing can prevail to shake him. So we're going to come to that place where we're foundationed in Christ so that we're not shakable and every wind of doctrine doesn't blow us off our foundation, because we're centered in Christ, not our own intellect, willpower, ability to produce goodness. Now, blessed be the Lord. There are many at this day who can truly and faithfully witness, testify, that they have been brought by the Lord into this state. And thus we have learned of the Lord, to wit, not by the high striving, aspiring mind, but by the lying low and being content with little, if but a crumb of bread, if but a drop of water, we have been contented with it, and so also thankful to the Lord for it. Not by our thoughtfulness and wise searching and deep considering with our own wisdom and reason have we attained it, but in the still, meek, humble waiting have we found, and that brought into death all those high-minded thinking and stuff like, which is not to know the mysteries with that part of us is not to know the mysteries of God's kingdom. And that which is to live, made alive and increased in life. That part of us that's united with God, that's submitted to God. Therefore, he that would truly know the Lord, let him take heed of his own reasoning and understanding. I tried this way very far, and I considered most seriously and uprightly. I prayed, I read the scriptures, I earnestly desired to understand and find out whether that which this people called Quakers testified of was the only way and truth of God, as they seemed to me, but to pretend. He thought the Quakers were pretending. They were the fakers. But all of this prejudice multiplied upon me. But my prejudice multiplied against me, and strong reasonings against them, which appeared to me unanswerable. But the Lord revealed his seed in me and touched my heart therewith, with that seed, which administered true life and virtue to me. I presently felt them there, the children of the Most High, and so grown up in his life and power and holy dominion, rule, as the inward eye being open to the Lord sees, spiritual discernment, and drew forth from me great reverence of heart and praises to the Lord, who had so appeared among men in these latter days. And as God draweth in any respect, give up this faithfulness to him. Give up in this faithfulness to him. So the things that are not of God, we give them up to him. And he delivers us from their rule in our lives, their influence. The things of the ego. So he's going to get into that. Right? Despise the shame. Take up the cross. For indeed it is the way which is very cross to man, to his ego, and which his wisdom will exceedingly be ashamed of. But that must be denied and turned from, and the secret, sensible drawings of God's Spirit waited for, and given up to, given into, acquiesced to, surrendered to. Mind people, he that will come into the new covenant must come into the obedience of it. The light of life, which God has hid in the heart, is the covenant. And from this covenant, God does not give knowledge to satisfy the vast, aspiring, comprehending wisdom of man, but living knowledge to feed that which is quickened by him. That seed of God within us, that life of God within us. That's what gets the knowledge, the experience of God. And the head knowledge does not get the experience of God or to know the deep things of God. Which knowledge is given in the obedience and is very sweet and precious to the state of him that knows how to feed upon it. Yeah, truly, this is of a very excellent, pure, precious nature, and a little of it weighs down that great, vastly knowledge in the comprehending part, which the natural comprehending man, which man's spirit and nature so much prizes and presses after. And truly, friends, I witness at this day a great difference between the sweetness of comprehending the knowledge of things, as expressed in the Scriptures. This I fed much upon formerly, and tasting the hidden life and the hidden manner of the heart, in the heart, which is my food now, which is my sustenance, which is what I live upon. Blessed forever be the Lord my God and Savior. Oh, that others had a certain and more sensible taste of that life and virtue and goodness of God, of the Lord, as it is revealed there in the heart. Surely it could not but kindle the true hunger and inflame the true thirst, which can never be satisfied but by the true bread and by the water from the living fountain. This the Lord, in all his tenderness of his love and in the riches of his grace and mercy, has brought to us. And this we earnestly and upright desire and endeavor, that others may be brought to also, that they may rightly, in the true silence of the flesh and in the pure stillness of the Spirit, wait for, and in the Lord's due time receive that which answers the desire of the awakened mind and soul of that new life, and satisfies it with the true and precious substance forevermore. Amen.
Since I missed the first part, is there a heading under which I could search this in order to read it, since it will be more comprehensible reading than listening?
I'll give a link afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So
great.
if that works. Yeah.
Yeah. And sections of it I certainly recognized. So if you don't want us to go in discussion now, you want us to have reflection, I'll shut up.
No, we can have discussion, reflections, and I have another part that I meant to put in between those two parts, I think. So I skipped this section, kind of thing. So, but I think I talked about it, how he makes a very, very sharp distinction between religion that man makes and is part of man's wisdom and man's willpower. And he calls that Babylon. Compared to what God produces within us, which the true church is supposed to be based on, the revelation from heaven that was talked about in the Gospel of John in our reading. It's not based on theories and conjectures and opinions, but it's based on what God reveals and produces within our heart. But yeah, I can open up to questions. Maybe while I listen to those and we discuss it, people can. I don't have all the answers, but I'm willing to answer whatever I do know. I can find the section that I skipped. Thanks.
Are there any particular differences between what Penington has been saying, what we've just heard, and the thoughts of other early friends at this time? Or is it basically the mainstream of Quaker thinking at this time?
I have the impression that most early friends came from a different social order, and so they didn't have the intense depth of intellectual seeking that Penington had. And because of his, I think we don't experience how urgent these questions were for that generation and how deeply into spiritual thought a scholar like Penington went, because we can kind of get along having a very shallow religion, really. But it was the big question of the day for him. And so he's able, because of his suffering over it, because he had taken in so much and then had such a huge wall to beat himself against because of all of the intellectual achievement he had, I think he's able to elucidate that journey for us better than some of the first friends. They're very carried by emotion's not quite the right word, but the felt transition into that experience of Christ speaking to them within. For me, Penington was a real bridge because he has more to say about the two distinct states. I don't know if that answers what you say, but I think there may be a social difference. And I forget what we know about who was a farmer and who was wealthy and who was not. But I know that Penington and his wife were quite wealthy and educated. So he's saying to us, beware of your education.
And he had a lot of it.
Yeah.
It does seem to accord well with Fox and other early friends. Like if they reach that stage of perfection where they're receiving God's perfection within them, then they have this opinion that I've read so far. But my reading is still pretty limited, and I'm still playing catch up. I didn't know I had ADD, so I hadn't read a nonfiction book for over a decade. And one of the last books I read was actually, and the first books I read from Quakerism was George Fox's journal. So that's quite the introduction. But not all early friends were in the perfection. And they say so themselves, right? So
you don't need to qualify that with early friends. We could say that now too.
Yeah, well, might be quite the opposite these days.
But what really struck me in that, and I couldn't. There's a lot of familiar quotations, but I couldn't encompass the whole thing. But what I did stand out was that going through the death of your old self and being drawn by God into a new life where you can't even define yourself, you're helpless and leaning entirely on God. That's the beginning of the work. There's still more to be done. The illuminating experience is not the end. And often when people tell their stories, they stop there. So I was really appreciating that Penington was laying out, there's a whole lot more work. You now have been placed on the real anvil, and then God's going to start pounding you. It's the way I'm going to put it. Yeah. The work is now just begun. Everything you did before was your own work, and so it was useless, and it's now lost to you. And when you've been awakened and give yourself up and are available to the Spirit, then you're really going to get work done. I guess this is a good promise.
I'm heartened that God does the work, though. And I remember we used to have someone in group that used to say how painful it was to be a Christian. And she was always saying that, right? But for me, the more that I'm looking to Him and my eyes are fixed on Him, the least painful it is. And we can come to the place where we're with David praying, if there's any harmful way within me, let's seek it out. And so, to those who would know the way to the kingdom, early friends had this advice, that the perfect ones anyway, that, stand still in the light and let the light examine you. So it's not self-examination. It's not beating myself up for X, Y, and Z, because that doesn't necessarily produce the fruit of God unless I bring it to Him. But there's process, right? There's process of coming to the kingdom, of being absolutely convinced that what I can do in my own strength and wisdom will not get me there. Doesn't come close to God's infinity. So there's that part of that conviction part. But then I have to also be convinced that God will do it and to let Him do it. So just believing these doctrines doesn't get me there. It's actually, I have to practice them. I have to let go of my, what I think I can do to help God, even, right? No, it's all, Pennington's very clear that it has to be from beginning to end. Everything has to come from God. And it's us saying yes to God. It's us being still in the light. It's us letting the light do its work within us. And so, yeah, all these verbs, like I'm really impressed, all these verbs, because he's always like talking about us. It's being done to us. We're saying yes. We're acquiescing. That's my word of the year. But we're not producing any of the fruit ourselves. We're relying on God for Him to produce His life and perfection within us.
It reminds me of the rich young man coming to Jesus and saying, "What must I do to have eternal life?" And Jesus saying, "Give up all that you have and follow me." And he was speaking of wealth, but I guess it's all the other stuff that we bring, all the other stuff of the old man that we have to give up in order to follow Jesus.
And what you said, Sylvia, reminded me of Paul, Saul, whose name was Paul as well. He came from great learning. He was a Pharisee of Pharisees, is educated under the top guys outside of Jerusalem anyway. And he comes to the point where he's like, I have to count it all as loss. All that I learned has to be lost compared to experiencing Christ and the excellency that Christ produces within me. It's not, there's a lot of people that have this theology that all that we learn before Christ does it within us is useful kindling, because I call it, for God to use. And I agree with the kindling part, because it's the part that gets burned up. It's not. So Paul, and I think it was either the Romans or the Corinthians, he says, I aspired to know nothing but Christ amongst you. I count all my previous learning as dung. That's the word. I think modern translations try and nice it up and say useless, but the word is dung.
There's a tension, isn't there, about his faith being a gift, and that it all comes from God. But there's also the idea that we have to do something in terms of giving things up. Do you see what I mean? One is a gift, but the other demands something of ourselves. Do you think that's right, or does everything come from God?
I can speak to that a little bit. It seems to me that it's not an effortful giving up. It's like whew, letting go.
There are many accounts of friends going through a very hard period where they're longing for truth, they're longing for God, made them suffer a great deal until they were brought to the point they gave up. And I think that's what we give to it. I think that maybe that's the seed that God put in us or something like that, but there's something that's not contented with false uh, food. There's no nutrition in it. And, I've been thinking a lot about the blessed are you when you hunger and thirst for righteousness' sake. I think there is an instinct for righteousness that's not satisfied when we're in the wrong. And yeah, I think God planted that there perhaps to make us discontented with what is not good for us. But we have to not bury it over. We have to not hide from the voice within that is pulling on us. It's hard to kick against the pricks, right? Anyway, excuse me, David had something to say. It might be different.
Right. I just feel a caution about how easy it is to couch things in terms of all this or all that. What Pennington says to me, and Fox and others, is this must be first. The rest of this is unimportant compared to this. And you're not going to be able to get rid of that. It'll have burdens for you that will be freed. But all of your experiences before are not suddenly gone, but they play a new role. They're no longer the ascendant, but God is ascendant, and His Spirit is there, and His Spirit can use whatever the Spirit chooses to use. And then at times maybe a little more of this, a little less of this, very little. But it's God's Spirit that must be in the ascendancy in our lives. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, we obviously see that Pennington's still using his intellect, but it's come under the rule of Spirit. It's come under the rule of Spirit, right? So it's in the right order because it's under the rule of Spirit.
Amen.
He talks a bit before what we read about when he subjected the Spirit to his intellect. And that didn't work out. He said that's not the right order. I like the man who comes to Jesus and says, I believe, I trust, but help my unbelief. And it's not, I don't believe that it's okay, we do as much as we can and then God tops us up with whatever we're missing. I don't believe that theology. But I think we bring to him what we can. We bring the loaves and the fishes, right? And he does something way beyond our ability to ever do from it. And so I like in our reading today that Pennington said, the willingness that God wrought in me. So he's willing, but help my unwillingness. You could say it that way, kind of thing. I've taken that phrase and put other verbs in there, other adjectives in there. And so when I know that when God calls me to do something, even I get a tap on the shoulder, I want you to go do that. It's like that. I don't want to. I can bring my unwillingness to God, and He can give me His heart instead. So I don't have to even make myself willing. I can bring what I have which is wholly deficient and not enough and not infinite compared to what he can produce. And he can transform it. He can replace it with his own heart. And so then it's all of him. I kind of like that actually when I'm unwilling, and then he gives me the willingness, because then he gets all the credit. And it's a place of rest again. It's just a place of purposefulness on my part to bring it to him, right? If I'm unwilling to bring it to him, then I won't get the transformation. And I can testify that every morning I wake up in the other spirit. I wake up in the darkness. I wake up in my egotistical self that's hypercritical and has no compassion for people and no gentleness and kindness and so forth. I wake up in that every day and have to bring it to him so that I get that transformation of heart. I get his heart. And, some days it's harder than others. And it's not instantaneous, even after all this time. I have to seek the face of God for, half an hour or so. But I find the before and after so compelling that it's very worth that half an hour. And I recognize that we're not all dark or all good, that we're mixture. But then when we give our darkness over to God, give him up, is terminology that he used it here, and I used to use that terminology too. When I give my darkness over to God, then he transforms it with him and gives me his heart instead. So I'm not held in a perfect state, in the state of perfection continuously by God and the experience of God continuously in these days, but I have experienced that more than once in my life for, short periods of time, months, where I lived in the experience of God. And I lived not in my own power and by my own wisdom, by my own will or decision of what I wanted to do. I lived by what he wanted to do. And that was my food and drink. And it wasn't produced by me. It wasn't sustained by me. It was all of God, none of me. Just my willingness to be open to God. That mustard seed of faith, which I brought to God, he multiplied and changed into his faith instead. But I bring it to him. I bring him my loaves and my fishes, as insufficient as they are to feed a crowd, and he multiplies them with his infinite heart and power.
Yes, I find that very insightful, that we bring what we are to Jesus, to God, however limited and hopeless it is, but that he is able to transform it into something special for his service.
I can feel some of what Penington talked about in my own experience. Or at least I related to my experience, whether this was what Penington was saying or not. Needed to be brought to the point where I understood that I was deeply broken, deeply wounded, incredibly needy. And in over years, I had to come to a point where I remembered what had been lost to my conscience mind, that having been attacked as a child. And so there was a great rift in my trust and understanding and relationship to other human beings. So something that is wrong within needs to be brought to the light before we can progress. And in the moment when I could sense God freeing me from all that, I had almost like a flash of illumination where I saw that, what David is talking about to me is like compost. Your life is compost. And so some of it's pretty mucky and some of it's, nice, fluffy soil. But whatever, God's going to use it and grow something good out of it. I had a flash as though the worst possible thing that you did or the worst possible thing that happened to you, the most unforgivable things, whatever, those all made the refiner's fire possible, was part of God's working in me, did bring me to the point where I recognized that, I was lost and broken. And yet there was a part within me that could meet the life and the birth that God was inviting me into, and let all that go and let it be transformed or of use or whatever. It seemed in a way to have been necessary in my life story. Not for everybody. Each person has a different hurdle or a different transition through the dark, even. And I kind of value hearing from Penington that, well, this is a transition that may take you years, and there are more stages to it, because we kind of tend to hear those stories of instantaneous conversion and upliftment, and then not hear about how the rest of the life and the struggles went, except for some Quaker journals, which are real good on that, I have to say.
Maybe too good.
Who is that, David?
Maybe too good.
Too good. Yeah. Yeah. Let's not discourage the children. Anyway, so that needs more thinking about. Well, of course you're going to go on having challenges and hurdles and things that God is going to have to plow up in me and or transform or completely remove or plant in me or whatever. So, but I'm not going to be able to perceive that in my old way of perceiving. So my inward language is going to have to be completely changed in order to notice what God is working in me and what I am needing to open up to his working. And, it seems all very nice and neat and organized when I read an old friend's journal that they write at the end of their life, how they went through all these challenges and stuff. But am I noticing what's happening to me in the process? Well, have I let my mind be changed so I can recognize it, perceive it, be open to it, work with it, allow God to work in me? I hadn't thought about that before, but I am a contemporary friend. I do need my own contemporary language in some ways. I'm much more prone, because of having grown up with it, to think in these old, very full language terms. And that this discussion group, for instance, is helpful because that is not necessarily serving me so well. It can become a front, a banner, an identifying, here's an old conservative Quaker, and that will not communicate to others well either. It's bliss to read Penington now, but I know he's Penington. He's passed away. I need to pay attention to what is happening in me and what my language is, and how can I communicate with others. I didn't know I was going to go there, so I don't. Madeline, was that helpful? You were smiling at me.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. David, can you expand a little bit on the maybe too good comment of the old stories?
Well, it can be problematic to negative. The negative has to be included. But again, it's looking at what is the dosage that's needed for an individual, and we have to leave that to the Spirit and trust that we'll be given what we need. And that doesn't mean that everybody needs the full dose of this individual's struggle and pain, but it also doesn't mean that we should be ignoring it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, what comes to me sometimes in reading the old journals, a lot of them were really young, of course, when the early Quakers, and their big, apparently their big horrible thing that they're so guilty about was like they were playing cards or something. And it's like, I kind of went a little beyond that. Can I still be part of this group?
Well, it's not the what as much as it is, where, sort of. Like, one of the things that I've always enjoyed baseball, and I like baseball, but when I think it was my senior prophecy, maybe, that's all a little fuzzy now, but the prediction was that I would be debating the place of baseball in Quakerism with D. Elton True.
I could see that. And did you?
No, but it's not something I wanted to give up, but it's basically, my life's too crowded the way it is, and I just don't have time for the enjoyment of baseball. So it's clearly, it's not gone per se, but it's way down there. Here's got the Spirit, hopefully being at the top, and that being not being the most important thing in my life, but going way, 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 way down.
Your gesture there makes me feel, the tugging, the pulling up, but sometimes painful, stretching out like pizza dough. Yeah.
But if it's replaced with things that God is calling you to do that are done from His love and His joy and His peace, it's not as hard a thing to give up, right?
Exactly. There's not the sorrow there,
Right.
and sense of loss.
I'm thinking when people are dying and dieting and they say, don't think about pizza. Well, if you don't have a replacement, it's not as good, right? You're always thinking about pizza then, right? But if you replace it with healthy, good things that are enjoyable, hopefully, then it's not as hard.
Black raspberries.
We're both.
It is really useful to have a Quaker community of all ages, so that you have people who've gone through different stages of this, complicated experience. And we might not talk to each other about it, but when we're in silent meeting together, I think all that is felt. It teaches you some trust to be young in a meeting where you have the sense of the adults, of their spiritual standing. And the adults need the young people, because we can get stuck in our notions about Quakerism and our opinions of ourselves just as much as anybody else. Yeah.
And I do like in his section where he's talking about that cleansing, he says sooner or later. So it's not this formula where you have to go through this stage and that stage, like kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to follow my stages, basically, is what he's saying there. It's however God does it in your life. And so I've heard some friends say, well, first you have to get rid of all the flesh before you can come into the kingdom, that kind of thing, right? Before you can experience the love of God, first you have to deal with all your darkness, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. That's not my experience. My experience is that I met the love of God first.
Mm-hmm.
I came, through life circumstances, I came to the end of myself in different ways. But I came to the love of God, and then things started getting worked out about other things. And it's however God orders things. It's not a set order that you have to follow these steps. And I love that. God has an individual plan for each of us because we're all individuals. I don't have to follow somebody else's formula. But he still attests to, sooner or later, this cleansing process will be in your life.
Well, just the concept of cleansing, that's something that is not a once and only thing. It's some of us take a bath every month, whether we need it or not. But it's not a one time thing. It's we need, as we need the cleansing, we have to allow it or be open to God's cleansing.
And life happens.
Mm-hmm.
That's sometimes said a different way. But God's promises is that He'll use it. He'll redeem it. Especially if we look to Him and are called to go along with His purposes in us. If we're resisting those purposes, we might not see it as much, but we get to see it when we look to Him and that having that gaze, that eyes fixed on Christ kind of thing. But then also, He redeems. He can bring redemption out of anything, which brings a certain amount of hope. We can be buried by all the darknesses that are going on. And there's a lot of them going on in the world, both outside of us and within us sometimes. But if He promises to bring good out of evil and light out of darkness, that gives me hope. And I don't have to fix the whole world's problems because that's not my job to do. But I can, okay, what do you want me to do? I can be very particular in getting that leading from God. And okay, and once I participate in what He wants me to do, at least inwardly, I'm in a better place. But He uses everything, all, like Sylvia mentioned before, all the bad things that we've done, all the bad things that are done to us and around us, like God can use it all and bring good out of it. And the verse this week was, that the verse says, no weapon formed against you shall prosper. And it's been upgraded a bit for me. It's like every weapon used against you will prosper you if I bring it to God. Is kind of a key linchpin if I look to God, right? And same with the Sermon on the Mount things. I don't think they're just automatic, but when I bring them to God, then I see the fulfillment of them. And so that intentionality of when I'm in the presence of God, when He's sustaining that, then I'm sharing everything with Him, everything I experience. So I'm in this continual state of receiving back from Him His heart and His resources and His wisdom, His direction as which way to go. And it just goes a lot better if I'm not resisting that, and I can give up the resisting heart that he talked about, Penington talked about. Anything that we resist God's rule and within us, we can give that over. We don't have to overcome it ourselves. We can give it over and have God overcome it for us, and He does a much better job anyway.
Can I ask, do you find that the ADD that you've experienced is being changed as God works through your attention and your thinking? And I would say, channeling the Spirit in the Quaker sense, by being in meeting and by praying and worshiping on our own too. I find it strengthens the channel and it attunes and changes us.
I think the change that's occurred for myself has been a decrease in the egocentricity, that I'm the best person in the world and I want things. And an ability to get alongside people and to be empathetic to their needs. It's taken a long time, I can tell you. It's gone on for many years, but I do see a difference.
I don't know if I would have called it egocentricity, although I think it probably was, but to me it was experienced as a suffocating isolation. At the same time as I feel deeply for others, I think I wasn't in myself enough to be centered here within. To have real compassion, you have to also be, in your true self. And so the false self couldn't feel connection and yet was too empathetic. That's a different personality type. So that was my struggle, I think. And what was wonderful to me was that God broke the walls down, and I did feel just the overwhelming love for the whole universe. But it was God's love. I was part of it. I was in that ocean with all these other happy ocean bubbles, basically, and accepting of everything. But I was no longer separate and isolated and lost. I was one with it because God was one with everybody. And so that opening experiences in time, it was in the past, but it still is kind of the basic thing of my self and perception anymore, is to know that God feels that way. And if I fall out of it, I can get back to it, or he'll bring me back to it. But yeah, egotism is deadening, cold, stifling, isolating. Oh, it's horrible. So I was happy to hear what you said, David.
From my own experience, my mother was neurotypical. I was neurodivergent, so oil and water doesn't mix, right? She felt there was always one right way of doing everything, and I'm like going, Mom, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of right ways of doing that same thing. So I got a lot of rejection and criticism growing up because I'm not doing it the one right way, which is kind of egotistical, right? I recognize my own ego in that, thinks it knows the one right way, that everybody should be doing it, and gets lots of criticism if they aren't doing it the right way. Before I check in with God in my daytime, that's exactly how I am. No compassion, no gentleness, no kindness, non-zero, just judgment and criticism.
What do you think? Do you ever feel God saying to you, Shadow, are you done with this yet? Because I'll take it away from you when you're done with it.
I'm not sure. I'm not very open in that state. When I open myself up to God, then he transforms it and takes it away. So I'm happy that he does. But the rest of my story was that because I was growing up in a dysfunctional home, and then I was criticized within the home, I was kind of all alone in certain ways, right? And felt, if this life is just, rejection everywhere I go, both outside the home, inside the home, then what's the point of living, right? I'm suicidal, right? Like, why bother? And so God had to come to me and say, I'll use your differentness to bless the whole. So that gives hope there, right? And I didn't know I was ADD at the time. I didn't know all the ways that I was different. I didn't really understand, right? That's why you feel suicidal. And he's had to come to me more than one time on different issues, right? And say, oh, no, I'll use this to bless the whole. So that's worth enduring the rejection, the criticism at every turn, because God's going to use it to bless people. That's enough. That was enough for me to go on living. And so now I think now that I'm aware that I have ADD, I didn't know I had it, right? Late diagnosis. And so I'm beginning to see how there's gifts in it, and there's superpowers in it, and there's things that I can celebrate in it. These are different, and I don't have to be like everyone else. And if people want to criticize it and reject it, that's on them. That's not on me. I'm not trying to be obnoxious. I'm just trying to be me, my true self. I'm not trying to be different on purpose, which some people have accused me of trying to do. It's like, no, this is the real difference. I can celebrate that difference. I can wait to see how God will bless people through it. So we don't all have to be the same color and the same shape of puzzle piece and, have the same picture on it and whatever else, right? He made each of us unique. And so I can bring that growing acceptance and celebration of myself to other people who aren't there yet. I can pass that on to other people and say, no, you were made different and unique, and God wants to use that as a blessing to other people. Just let him. You don't have to conform, but be transformed by God. Let it be come under his rule, because he brings good things, even out of the miry clay.
Yes, I like that. You don't have to conform because you can be transformed.
Amen.
And so as long as I seek his face, then I'm put in order, the right order. The spirit takes dominion over intellect and ego and different parts of the darkness that's within me, still with me to today. It's not my true self, but it's still here. It's there every morning, get put down, and the good gets raised up. And I'm extremely thankful for it, because I wouldn't want to put that other guy out onto the world or onto myself.
Because if we're conforming, we're not being ourselves. If we are transformed, we are being ourselves, but differently and in a good way.
I'm thinking about, I don't know who first said that Quakers are a peculiar people. But we're a lot more peculiar than maybe even that first person thought, and each in our own way. I'd like it to think, as if there was a box of coloring crayons that just went from horizon to horizon beyond, out of sight. There are more colors than I can even hunger for, and God made them all and likes them all, and so I can't get all rigid about Quakerism. I even think that God is working in every person, and the thing that we're experiencing is that sense that our Creator's longing to come close to us and is drawing us to him, and that it's possible to live in relationship with him. Well, in other cultures and other religions, surely that is still the case, and it would just look different. I might not recognize it, but I can trust that it's there working, and so it's very precious to us all, I think, that experience that John Woolman had, where he recognized that the spirit was moving between him and this Native American man, and so he gestured to the interpreter to be silent so that they could feel it and hear it. I think it's real important not to get too proud of or wedded to our process that has worked for our community, because that isn't the life. It may help the life, or for this group of people that were brought together, that may be the way that works for us, for God to converse with us and reach us. But I have to believe God is doing that all the time with everyone who will listen, and that possibly there are belief systems and cultural ways that shut the light down more and make it harder. But I also think God sends a prophet to every community, to every human family. Or I hope, that's my hope. Oh, hello, are you joining us?
My cat joined us a little bit, and I had to finally let him outside.
Yeah,
So we're ending soon, but gives anyone have a last word that they feel God giving them to speak, or just want to speak? Want to leave the space just open? Any little niggling?
wondered if Donna had something because I haven't heard from her.
Yeah, she said she had to be away and get some stuff done. So hopefully she'll come at the end. She probably has an alarm set for the end, I hope. Shall we end with some silence then? Thanks for coming. I appreciated everything that everybody shared.
Yes, Fred.
Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you for reading such a long piece, but you know that I'm going to have to go read it for myself. I couldn't pick it up all.
I'll send the link out.
Yeah.
And again, this meeting is recorded, so if anyone wants to, if
I'm
anyone
always-
wants their comments removed, let me know too, so that I can remove them and try and do my best to edit them out. It's been my policy in all the reading groups that I go to that we record and put it so other people that can't make it for this time slot can still get benefit from it. And they can, tell me how wrong I am.
And I can't say I know nothing about Pennington anymore.
That's another one of the things that the start is only the beginning of the work. There's a lot.
Is that an example of ignorance is bliss?
Okay, friends, go well, go with spirit, go with God.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good to hear from Isaac.
Madeline, she's gone.
Let's see. Farewell.
Hey, Donna, just reminded to save the transcript. You can stop the recording now if you want. And you're muted.
Okay,
Now
I'm
go
gonna
to-
do one thing at a time.
Right. I'm not trying to be
No,
pushy.
I
Just
know.
I need reminders all the time, so then I try and give reminders too. And then how goes, David?